And hello, everyone, and welcome to Radio Toni. You're listening to Toni Lontis and John Williams today on The Power of You. And just a reminder, we are live streaming into Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube on my channel and John's. And so you can listen to any catch-up shows wherever you find your podcasts. And if you just search for Radio Toni, you will find all the links. Otherwise, jump on to radiotoni.com for further information. And you can also jump on to Andreia Solutions to find out more about John and his team. Now, my awesome co-host today is John from the Andreia Method, and his desire is to inspire, influence, and impact your world by being who you were meant to be. So, John, welcome back to the show this week. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, Toni. It's great to be back. It's I love that opening thing. I'm like going, yay, we're here. And if I just offer a little clarification to that lovely introduction, the purpose of Andreia is to help individuals to inspire, impact, influence their world through being who they were born to be, not who they've been told they should be. So just to make sure we're clear about that. I'm just here to help. We're just here to help. We can't be in their shoes. It's killing shoes.
It's a really powerful mission statement, John, and I'd really like you to read that, to tell that again, because it's a powerful statement of your desire and the way that you want to impact the world. So let's just go again.
Do it one more time. Okay.
Absolutely.
So our mission in Andreia is to help individuals to impact, influence, to inspire, influence, and impact their world. Yeah, you got to get that right, eh? To inspire, influence, and impact their world by being who they were born to be, not who they've been told they should be. So we often are living a life where we're working within other people's expectations of who we should be and what we should do and how we should live. And even though outwardly we might be extremely successful, and this is a life I've lived, but we're just not happy. I was speaking to a young lady in Los Angeles just yesterday, and she's been incredibly successful.
Yeah.
And yet there's just a piece missing. And that's where we can help. We can really help in that area, and for her to really understand, or individuals to understand where they fit in. Tanya, my partner in Andreia, she says, two most important days of your life are the day, or most impactful, the day you were born and the day you work out why.
That's so true, John. And I know your journey with Tanya very well, but I'd really like to explore the essence of Andreia Method today and who it helps.
Okay. Well, the history tells this tale as far as the Andreia Method is concerned.
Sure does.
Tanya and I created this course as a course to live by. And what it's about is helping individuals to understand that often the way they are thinking is not actually helping them. That being mind identified, as we call it, so as that you are operating at the behest of what pops into your head, is not necessarily doing you all the favors that you might think it is. We do this through a process which we now call the Andreia Method. And the Andreia Method is broken into 3 modules. The first module, Discovering Your Default, is about, like an iPhone. You wake up to a default position every morning. Every human does. That's the way it is. And if it's always been that way, it's the way it's always going to be. But it doesn't have to be. When you can understand and discover your default position so as that you can look at it, examine it, and decide whether that is who you were born to be or what somebody's told you to be, then you can start to work on that and to change into who you want to be, who you were born to be, and because you say so. So it is a created identity, and that's why the second module is called Create a New You. And there we look at the issues such as speaking your truth. And when I say speaking your truth,
Mm.
it's not so much putting your hand on the Bible or the holy book of choice, or doing the affirmation, speak the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help me God. It's about talking from your heart. It's about being authentically who you are and opening up to those that are around you about what there is for you in your truth. And that will set them free too. And I've had people say to me, yeah, look, I went home and I spoke to my partner, and I actually told him how I felt about that. And you know what his response was? He went, oh my God, thank goodness. Because I kind of feel the same way, but I was too scared to say something to you. It's amazing the power of speaking your truth. And then we talk about the purpose, mission, being a vision, mission, and purpose, the why. This is where we start getting to the why. What is it, the why?
Yeah.
Why, what it is that really makes you, it rings your bells, makes you want to get up in the morning. Then we talk about the power of your language. And I just made a post on LinkedIn in response to a post that Toni put. She was using words which are apologetic language. You know, if you say just or actually or these sorts of words and put them into your language. The post I made was that it's interesting, even though you may not be conscious of using this language and your interlocutor may not be conscious of you using the language, there is nevertheless an effect at a subconscious level. You're being apologetic for about what you're saying. So you really got to be careful around the language that you use. And we also use our language to create models in our minds. So
We do.
again, if we're not using the correct language, then that becomes an issue in what we're actually creating in the world. Nothing material exists in this world that did not originally exist in somebody's imagination. That's the power of imagination. Everything has
John,
existed
let's
in
just
somebody's
say that
imagination.
again.
Nothing of a
This is
material
powerful
nature,
stuff.
nothing of a material nature exists in this world that didn't exist in somebody's imagination first. And that we
So
create
when
our
you
world with
think,
language.
yeah,
Sorry, Toni.
so when you think about some of the amazing innovations and inventions in our century, for instance, they were but a thought in someone's mind. So think about the car, the aeroplane, the train. They all started as a thought in your brain, a thought in your mind.
In
Yet look what
somebody's
we have
mind, yeah.
today.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a
So it's
lovely story
important for
about,
listeners.
sorry.
It's important for our listeners to grasp just what power you have sitting between your two ears.
There's a lovely story about Thomas Edison and his factory
Mm.
burning down. And I may not get this verbatim, but the rough idea of it is, instead of bemoaning the fact that there was roughly $34 million in today's dollars going up in flames, Edison celebrated it and turning to his son, this is wonderful. This fire has done us a wonderful favor. It has burnt up all our mistakes and we can start again. Because what was important was him as a human and his ability to imagine, and he carried with him the knowledge. Yes, he might have lost some notes, but the potential had been returned, which is an interesting way of looking at it. And I think it's a great way of looking at your life. When something goes wrong, celebrate it, accept it. There's no point in trying to fight it.
Absolutely.
It just is, and move on. There is a lot of strength in that. And then you also have that learning to share with others, that they too can survive and walk through those difficult, dark times. So getting quickly back to the rest of the model, you've got responsibility
Yes.
because you have to do it yourself. It's on you. If it's to
Mhm.
be, it's up to me. And we talk about that. But finally, and most importantly, you have to take action, but action of a particular kind, conscious action. So conscious action
Yes.
is about understanding that the results that you are getting today are because of who you are being. They fall out of who you are being today. And if you want to change those results to reflect the new you, to reflect what you want to get out of life, then what you have to do is create the new you. Now, to do that, the burning question is, who do you need to be for those results to already exist. So then you find a gap between who you are being today and who you need to be. And that's the gap you've got to try and work over. So we call that be, do, have. Then there's accountability. I can go into accountability, but the most important thing about accountability is you tell other people, like speaking your truth is a part of accountability, because you're telling other people what it is you want. You don't know who's listening. You don't know who
That's right.
they might know, who might open the doors for you to have what you want. And I use the example of an expedition to Everest, who, they might know people in Nepal. Who knows? Speak about it and the magic can happen. You give the room for it. The last two are focus, because if you're a little bit like me, I go for the next bright, shiny object, and I've got to discipline myself that, oh, hang on, John, you haven't quite finished over here yet, and you need to focus, right? You need to focus on what it is that you are doing, and you need to put in structural supports around that to ensure that you can continue to focus. And this is the persistence issue. It's not blind persistence, it's persistence that's created by structure on a focused issue that you wish to achieve. And finally, gratitude. Now, I can't say enough about
Yes.
gratitude. And it's been used to haul people out of the most darkest possible places by finding just one thing to be grateful for. And it might be that 2 days ago somebody gave you enough money to buy a coffee, or something like very, very small. And when you live my life and where I'm at, I've got so much to be grateful for. It's very easy, but one of the things that you got to be aware of is don't take it for granted, because it can all go away. Continue to be grateful, and everything is particular to the individual concerned. The great masters have learned the art of gratitude in advance. They were able to work out, what would it feel like if I was being the person that I want to be? How grateful would I be? And then express that to the universe. Again, it's a way of drawing the power towards you, drawing people towards you that are going to help you get what you want. And then guess what? You get back to discovering your default again, because you've got a new default, and around you go. And I think I've been around that circle so many times, I'm just about dizzy. I still do it.
John, when we were prepping for the show this week, we had a wonderful conversation about our default position and what that meant, which actually segued into a conversation about young people and in particular young men and men across the world at the moment. And that conversation started from a discussion about our internal mind chatter and what our internal minds must be saying for our wonderful young men to be at a point where they think that there is no alternative. And we sort of then went on to talk about John's mum's comments about his ability to show vulnerability on the show last week. And so we decided this week that we wanted to explore a little bit more about the masculine mind chatter. And who better to discuss that is my wonderful co-host, John, from a male perspective, because John has been incredibly successful with international business. He has had that big, huge life that so many of us aim and strive for. But he ended that and decided to work out what makes him happy. And so I'm going to let John start to talk about the things that go on in that beautiful male brain and what it takes to shift and have the life that you want. So, John, tell us about that.
Wow, now I feel burdened, Toni. I've just what
No,
a
you
big thing.
don't.
What a big Thank you for giving me the opportunity. It's a privilege. I won't pretend to be a world expert in anything, but I do know a few things that have become present to me as an older male. And I'd like to kick off the conversation talking to listeners who have got kids who may be at threat. And the big issue they'll already know is getting them to listen. It's all very well for you and I to talk all the different issues over here and now. And teenagers feel things intensely because they have such little experience in life. And what seems to matter most to them is role models. So if you have a teenager in your life that you're worried about, and you're worried about them finding a way forward and finding a way to live their life their way, then I would suggest you first port of call is to look in your own backyard and ask yourself, are you living your life your way? Are you being the example that your teenager needs to see? Or is your life one where they look at it and go, well, gee, if that's the future, I don't want a bar of it. I know it sounds terribly brutal, Toni, but this is where our children get our leads from. We talk about superstars being this, that, and the other thing, and a very poor role model. But research indicates that the role models that children actually follow are the role models that they can relate to. And that's generally going to be their family, close family, or associates, friends, those sorts of things, people around who the kid actually knows, teachers, coaches, uncles, aunties, cousins, brothers, sisters, mothers and fathers. And there's a kind of a reason, grandparents, there's a reason I want to hook in as many people, neighbors in this situation, because it does take a village to raise a child. And even if a child finds themselves in a position of hopelessness in their own home, there are others that can role model it.
Who can help.
Of course, and there's so much more to this, and I'm woefully underqualified to talk about. What I can say, though, in terms of the messages in our minds, just a few things about our default as human beings. Firstly, when information that we get, okay, most of the information that we're exposed to as human beings is filtered out. It's filtered out because we have billions of bits of data coming at us at any point in time. And so what our mind does in order to cope, it, based on previous experience and often traumatic experience, it recognizes patterns in that information and says, oh, that set of information looks like this, and therefore this is what happened last time. So if it's a bad experience, you got to get a big beware. And our brain is 80% better at keeping bad experiences than good experiences. So very rarely, but occasionally, there's a good one that comes up and goes, oh, this is going to be a pleasurable experience. Now, when you think about that's actually programmed on experience, and we're talking about teenagers, they don't have a lot of experience. And I once sat down and calculated, I compared it, so I got fascinated. You talked about my mum before. Hi, Mum. I hope she's
Hello, John's mum.
I got fascinated about the difference between time in my mother's world and time in my grandson's world when he was born. Now, forgive me if I'm wrong, I can send people the model if they'd like it. So just put the relative birth dates together and work out what a minute is in proportion of life. Okay, so 1 minute to a 60-year-old is a lot shorter time than it is to a 6-month-old. All right.
Yes.
So again, talking about the relative pressure of being a teenager, when you say to a teenager, that's only a couple of years, you'll get through this, it's only a couple of years. What that will feel to them is something like 10 years for someone my age. Right? If somebody said to me, oh, look, that's only going to take till you get to 70, man. And I have the advantage of knowing that years go by faster. But they go, 2 years, probably 10 years is easier for me to consume than 2 years for a teenager. So when we talk about hopelessness and
Mm-hmm.
difficulties that kids face. This is their reality, and they really have very little to do about it, which is why they need elders around them to
Yeah.
show them, and why they are so easily influenced, because they are looking for influences.
Yes.
There's a wonderful book written by the late Celia Ashley. Um, she's a New Zealander, and she was the first female in the New Zealand prison system as a prison guard. But she was also an
Yes.
anthropologist, and she wanted to know how
Oh.
was it that all these lovely young men, ended up in prison.
Mm-hmm.
What went
Yes.
wrong? You know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the book is called He'll Be Right, and
Yes.
in it she interviewed all these secondary school students up and down the country on a series of subjects,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the things that came clear, that it is this teenage period is like a bridge, and they need guidance
Yep.
over that bridge, and they need firm guidance, and
Yeah.
young men. And I am not for 1 minute disparaging single mothers who don't have males available, but male role models are important to young men, as female role models are important
Absolutely.
to young women. And so it is about, again, a village that's
Yeah.
responsible. So, and in that book, I carry on further, is that she got this lovely piece in there, that there's this constant dance
Mm-hmm.
between parents and their teenagers. The teenagers want to push the parents away, but they want the parents to
Yes.
push back, because they want to know there's boundaries, and that's how they know they're
Yeah.
loved, because there's boundaries down. And
Yeah.
so don't push too hard. I mean, and then she goes and said, now when I talk about boundaries, I'm not talking about putting whitewash lines on the ground. I'm talking about barbed wire fences with a national grid running through them, so that when the kid
Yeah.
hits the boundary, they know, because they're
They
not
know.
particularly sensitive.
Yeah. Yeah.
These are the things
The
that are
t
going. I mean, we all know about the faults in the world, but these are the things that really
Yes.
appear to be very, very real. So it can be very dark, and the kid gets in a loop.
And the reason that and I were discussing this earlier in the week were some of the recent statistics about young men and suicide. And so we felt that it was very important to broach the subject and link it to what is going on in their minds, what sort of internal mind chatter uh, and thoughts are running through their minds, where they think that there is no option. And if you take into consideration what John's just explained about that time factor, here we have a very vulnerable group of young men in particular. I'm not discounting young women, but today we specifically wanted to talk about young men, because that is the highest rate of suicides in Australia at the moment. And we wanted to link that to the sorts of things that might help them understand what's going on in their minds, or any of the adults listening to this show might be able to then have a conversation with the young person in their lives, and just check in and see what's going on in their mind, with the understanding that they see time, 1 or 2 years, as 10 years. For them, it's a long time. We know as adults, and particularly John and I in our 50s and 60s, time goes by in a snap for us, but it doesn't for them. And we need to reach them and give them some sort of loving understanding that helps them understand that it will pass, that what they're feeling is temporary, and that thoughts are only thoughts. They don't have the power to, for you, enough of power to want you to end your life prematurely. So, John, I want to go back to that internal chatter and how we have that conversation with young men about internal chatter. And I know that this is quite a vulnerable thing for guys to do, but again, both John and I feel really that this is an important conversation to have, particularly when we're talking about the Andreia method and how that helps you do some of these things. And in particular, the first module, which is the focus for today. So, John, let's talk about some of the things that can go on in a young man's mind that they can have direct influence over, that they may not realize are taking hold in their mind. They may not realize that these thoughts are going through their head and they are having a detrimental effect on them.
Two things on that, Tony. I want to
Yeah.
quickly address what you were saying before I go there. The most important thing are role models around this for kids. They
Yes.
need to see people who have got over the hill, that are prospering on the other side. This is the key thing. They, with this
Yes.
information that they can't have experienced themselves, so they need to be able to see it somewhere else, which is the onus and the weight that is on those around parenting and being part
Mm-hmm.
of the village. And I also want to put it here in that in the worst case scenarios where somebody loses a child, nobody does that deliberately.
No,
And it's not a
that's
failure
right.
of that individual, it's a failure of us as a
No.
society. And that's where
Yeah.
we need to go as a society, that says that we have a responsibility to our young, and without our young, we don't have a future. And we
Yeah.
need both males and females to achieve that outcome. So
Yes.
it's a cold reality. Getting to
We
your
do.
point about the internal chatter, and I think
Mm.
my advice to young people would be pretty simple: is if you're saying to yourself, "I'm not good enough," or "Who do you think you are?" Well, those are the two
Mm-hmm.
favorite channels that play in everybody's head,
They
right?
do.
Everybody at any time that tries to attempt something, the first thing that comes up is, "Who do you think you are?" and
Yes.
I'm not good enough. Now, you got to ask yourself,
Mm.
well, why do we all have these things in common? It's simply because our reactions as a human being have nothing to do with our happiness,
Mm.
and zero to do with what we may or may not achieve. Our
Mm-hmm.
brain is programmed quite simply, in an ideal world, to keep us alive, so as that we
And
breed,
safe.
procreate. Yeah, well, that's safe, yes, because by that
Yes.
nature, it's trained to pick patterns, particularly ones that threaten us, which is why the negative bias in the human mind, things that
Mm-hmm.
might hurt us, and focus on those, because it wants us to stay away from them. Now, I would
Alive.
hope alive. I would hope that a young person informed of that says, look, the way you are feeling, totally normal, totally
Yes.
okay. It's okay to be miserable. And yeah, I know you got a broken heart. And I know you had your whole life set on getting on the team. I get it. But this too will pass. That this is
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't mean those two thoughts going through your mind, that you're not good enough, that and who do you think you are? Well, I tell you one thing you can think you are, is that you can actually say, I'm the person that'll do the work to be good enough. I'm the person that
Yep.
will pick up those things and go, oh, okay, I didn't get on that football team, and I kind of get that. That means that the kids that are on there were better than me. That can be a really hard lesson, but let's assume, and then head to the gym and go, they were better than me this time. Let's see how they go in tryouts next year, right? When I've
Yeah.
put on 10 pounds and I'm pushing an extra 50 pounds in the gym, let's see how they
Yes.
go then. It's about doing, if you want to change your life, you can change your life. And of course, this is about relationships with kids. This is about
Yes.
having your kids talk to you and trust you.
Yes.
And
Enough to say, this is what is going through my mind at the moment. I don't think that I'm okay. And it's allowing our precious young people the scope to be able to say, I'm not okay. I don't know what's going on. I don't know
Mm.
why I feel this way. And having people around them to tell them, yeah, this is normal. And yeah, it's yucky. And yes, this is horrible. And yes, I know you feel terrible. But here, look at this person, look at that person, talk to this person, and understand that you are part of normal humanity, that normal humans feel these thoughts, think these thoughts on a regular basis. But now you know that they're normal. Now's your opportunity to start challenging those thoughts. When that thought comes up in your mind that says, I'm not good enough, challenge it with something positive. John, what are some examples that you can think of? I can think of lots of mine, but I'm particularly keen to have the male perspective today.
Okay, well, I just want to jump onto what you just said there. You talk about other
Yeah.
people, and I think it's really,
Mm.
really important in this discussion that we acknowledge the role of the professionals here, because if you can give a kid a
Yes.
smorgasbord of options, like there's the school counselor, there's your teacher,
Yes.
there's religious leaders, there's coaches, there's other friends. You
Yes.
talk to somebody about how you are feeling, even if they can't speak to their parents. And of course, then there's
Yes.
psychologists and psychiatrists and the professionals, and they're all there for a reason, because they do a very, very good job. And I'm not putting myself up
And they will
in
help
any,
you.
yeah, I'm not putting myself up any of that league. So I'm totally telling people to go and seek professional help. But I would also suggest to you that making a smorgasbord of options available to you, young man
Yes.
or young woman that's looking for someone to talk to, is going to enhance that possibility. Aunties, uncles, grandparents,
Yes. Yes.
Um,
Yes.
so yeah, and as far as the thoughts that go as a young man, this was a very long time ago for me, unfortunately. But I can say,
But
I can
that's
say
why we
sometimes
need,
again, it's the what from a 60-year-old's point of view appears to be trivial, for a 16-year-old,
absolutely
it's
devastating.
world ending. It's world ending.
Yes.
And I remember being dumped by my girlfriend, and
Ouch.
it was yeah. Oh, don't worry, she dumped me a few more times after that too, but I was persistent until the final time. There we are. But I'd grown up a wee bit by then. I'd also learned that it wasn't the end of the world, and this is an interesting point. I'd learned it wasn't the end of the
Yes.
world because I had lived through it.
Yes.
The very
Yes.
first time you get your heart broken, it is absolutely
You
devastating.
absolutely.
You know, and yet it's part of living. It's actually part of the fiber
Hmm.
of
Mm.
life. If you don't dare to love and
Yes.
risk losing that, then you don't get the marvelous upside. So
Yes. You
that
don't
that is a
get
very
to live.
significant things for teenagers, is relationships,
Yeah.
as they start
Yeah.
navigating their way through their sexuality, and then who they might want to form
Yes.
bonds with. And of course, there's all sorts of
Yes.
questioning, and often, in those circumstances, as teenagers, it seems like almost an obligation that whatever your family believes, to fly in the face of it. They might come from a family of atheists, so they decide that they want to join
There you
evangelical
go.
Christians. And that's not to say that
Yes.
that's good or bad. It's exploring, it's being a kid. But if you experience rejection from your family because of what you've
Yes.
expressed as a feeling, then you're going to stop expressing it, and you're going to
Yeah.
feel like, okay, rightio, that's not safe.
Yeah.
And this is the
It's
beginning for men. This is the beginning of,
yes.
harden up. Big boys don't cry. And an
Yes.
attitude that makes it very difficult for men to get in touch with their emotions for the rest of their lives until
Yeah.
they crash. So,
Yeah.
and that was my experience, But
Yeah.
I hasten to add, I had a marvelous childhood, but I had
Yes.
a very typical
Mhm.
1970s teenage years, and we were not particularly advanced in those days. And it was rugby and sports, and
Yes.
men were men, with a boot deep
Yes.
voice and hairy arms. And
Yes.
men didn't go around talking about how they were feeling, and they didn't go around expressing that they would rather not be the breadwinner, they'd rather stay at home. They'd rather raise the
Yeah,
kids.
yes.
Um,
Yes. Yes.
and that was, again, look, this is the thing, it's intergenerational. Like, my mum will tell
Yes.
me that, because I would much rather have done singing and dancing than played rugby, and I wasn't bad at
Yes.
rugby, I was pretty good at rugby, but I really wanted, she
Yes.
said, if I had enrolled you in that, your dad would have died. And that doesn't mean my dad's a bad man. It means my
No,
dad was
no.
programmed to believe that males that sing and dance were potentially homosexual. So let's not do
Yes.
that, because that's effeminate.
Yes.
And
Mhm.
what I'm saying is that your children are your children. The more they feel comfortable about expressing themselves in whatever way it is, let them do it.
Yes.
A very good
Yeah.
friend of mine said about kids and teenagers, and I think there's an awful lot of truth in this, it's kind of like
Mhm.
being the custodian of a jigsaw puzzle. They will fall to
Yes.
pieces. Your job is to
Yes.
keep all the pieces on the table and in relative proximity to each other,
Tea.
so as that when they
Yes.
finally pull themselves together, there ain't too many missing.
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
as a father of 30-year-olds now, reflecting back on who they were as teenagers, I can remember almost quite vividly when they came past that stage
Yes.
and turned into human beings again. And we've just recently had that here with my stepson. He's went through a very
Yes.
difficult period at school. School was really difficult, and not academically, but just socially. He found it very, very difficult to work
Uh-huh.
in that situation. He's got out of school. He went to university. He has a girlfriend.
Yes.
He's an absolute delight now, and because he feels fully
Yes.
expressed, he's able to be
Mm.
who he says he is, and that's okay. And I think that's a
Yes.
really important point.
Yeah. One of the other points of our John and our conversation earlier in the week was the concept that rather than having feminine and masculine traits, let's have beautiful human traits. So when we're talking to our young men, the importance of allowing them to understand that being kind, being gentle, they are wonderful human traits. They're not necessarily masculine or feminine, they're good human traits. And the problem with some of the generations that have gone before us, that men who openly cried or who were openly loving and kind were labeled as feminine or having feminine traits. I'd really like to see this generation of young men and women being enabled to feel human traits versus masculine or feminine, because we need well-rounded humans, and those traits that are considered to be part and parcel of being a wonderful human being include things that are considered masculine and feminine. So, females, young women, can be strong without being masculine. Young men can be kind and giving without being feminine. These are part and parcel of human traits. And if we start talking about them that way, we take away the predetermined judgment of society, and we allow our young people to grow and learn and be the unique human being they are going to be without any labels and judgment. And it's particularly at that teenage where we start to question and ask and develop those things that will make us that unique adult as we get older. And it starts with those conversations in our head. What are we saying to ourselves? Are we being kind and then uh, self-denigrating ourselves because we're a young man and we've been kind. No, you're a young man, you've been kind. That's an awesome trait to have. So really lifting up our young men to allow them to cry when they're hurt, to express themselves when they're unsure, and to be vulnerable. I know John's talked to me that it is still difficult for him to be vulnerable, but he's allowed himself to do so on this show so that he can set an example for those precious young people and their parents who might be listening. It's part of why he and Tanya developed the Andreia method, to give people a framework that enables them to be the best person they can be. And and to be that best person, we need to talk about some of these concepts around what goes on in our mind
Mm.
in secret.
Yeah. So just picking up on that, I think
Yeah.
we actually probably ought to congratulate society for some of the moves that we've made,
Yes.
because the many, many moons ago, I used to work in broadcasting, and in
Yes.
broadcasting, there was a preponderance, or seemed to be, maybe because they felt free to express themselves,
Yeah.
of gay men. And one of the things
Yes.
that was
Yes. Yes.
talked about in there was that, look, you didn't need to worry about the openly gay guys. They weren't anywhere near interested in you. It was the ones that were still in the closet that might think that you were in the
Yes.
closet, that might cause you some discomfort. And then you have this, oh, gee, can we spot the closet gay
Yes.
by effeminate behaviors and interests and these sorts of things. So these labels
Yes.
have gone
Yes.
on
Labels.
certain things that and I think that society needs to be congratulated that we've grown up and we've understand that sexuality is a spectrum, and you fit on it
Yes.
somewhere, and it's all
Wherever you fit.
okay. So,
Mm.
and again, it's enabling the individual to express who they think they are and who they think they're not. You know, who
Yeah.
knows how it will end up. And I say that from someone who's experienced children coming home and
Yes.
expressing that they are gay and having to live
Yes.
with it, and the full spectrum. I think we're using
Yes.
the whole LGBTQI plus situation, and
Yes.
and and that's a privilege as a parent.
Yes.
If your child comes home and says, "I'm different. This is how
Uh-huh.
I feel," don't take it as an offense. Take it as a privilege. Take it that you're one of the few
Yes.
parents in the world that are going to get to experience that. And yes, doesn't mean less hair and all the rest of it. Oh, possibly,
Mm.
quite possibly. But it is what it is. This is your child.
Yeah.
And your child, if you have a good enough relationship for them to
That they've
express that to
told you.
you, they've told you,
Yeah.
the last thing you want to do is put up a wall there, obviously.
Yeah.
So I think our society, our governance, and around the world where these issues have been recognised and even written into law are to be congratulated, because
Yeah.
this is the way in which we stop putting labels on certain behaviours, and we stop putting labels on certain ways of being that we call feminine or
Yes.
masculine. Because I also
Yes.
want to think strength. I want to say strength of character and
Yeah.
the ability to persist and to hold on and to the masculine characteristics. There is nothing wrong with those either. We talk about
Absolutely.
men's inability to express vulnerability or to be vulnerable. Vulnerability is it's a bit like a muscle. The more you use
Yes.
it, the stronger
Yes.
you get, and along with that, authenticity. But when you're a teenager,
Mm.
it's very hard to know who you really are.
Oh God, yes.
It's hard to
Yeah.
know how you feel for 1 minute to
Yeah.
another, right?
Yeah.
And this is where I repeat yet again, goes back to the role models that are around the kid. If you've got an at-risk kid, you got to look at the role models and you got to say, how do we
Yes.
demonstrate to this kid that it is going to be okay. And you know what? I want to put my hand in the air and go, as a parent, I struggled to get that right. I really,
Yeah.
really struggled. And
I was gonna
I
ask you,
pay a
John.
price. I'm still paying a price with on that one, trying to rebuild that relationship.
I
So
was gonna
it's
ask
not
you,
easy.
how hard is it for a parent who wants to be loving and supportive, but still has elements of those old thought patterns when, say, for instance, your child comes home and says, I think I'm gay? How hard is it for a parent to lovingly respond versus think all of those thoughts around, oh my God, how hard is their life going to be? Oh my God, are they going to be okay? Those sorts of things. How difficult was it for you?
Well, I think it comes down to the labels that you have going in your head already, the patterns that you go to already. What
Yes.
does it mean to you for somebody to
Mm,
be gay? What does that mean? What models do you have in
yes.
your experience and your relationship with those models? Now,
Yeah.
when I was a parent very young, and I was nowhere who I am today
Yeah.
back then. So I did not understand how my brain worked. I had no concept of my reticular activating system and my default
Yes.
position, and I had no language around that whatsoever. I did, however, have a pretty good relationship with what it was to be gay, having had a number of friends that were gay, in particular in broadcasting,
Yes.
and
Yes.
it wasn't the end of the world for me. But I think, again, check in whether you are reacting to the past and to the models that you have created or have been created for you, or are you responding
Yes.
to the now and the needs of your child?
Child.
That's the point, to actually stop there and say, okay. I remember my wife and I, when this information came out, it was
Yes.
actually her friend told us, you do realize so and so is gay.
Yes.
And we're like, and we both did really, really good.
Yes.
I think we did a really good paying face. And your
Yes.
point would
Yes.
be, and then went out later on, went, oh my God, what is it?
Exactly.
we
Exactly.
kept our reactions to ourselves, because it's the
Yes.
uncertainty and it's the unexpected,
Yes. Yes.
and that's okay. It's okay to feel vulnerable. And
Absolutely.
the solution to it is not to work on the kid, but to work on you. The
Yeah.
kid will work
Yep.
themselves out, and they're probably not
Yep.
going to listen to you unless you are one of these magical ones that have the relationship. They're much more likely to
Yeah.
listen to the school counselor. They're much more likely to listen
Mm,
to their coach. There will be
mm.
a tripod. There will be some point, and it might be, look, it might be the new girlfriend, right? That might be the
Yes.
one that he's listening to, the girlfriend,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
there's your point of information.
Yeah.
Build, think about that how to communicate the message through. But if you can't get verbal messages through, then you have to role model it. You have to be about,
Yes.
you know how life, it can be meaningful and good, and that doesn't
Mm.
mean rich and powerful. If you are rich and powerful,
That's
well,
right.
God bless you. But that's probably not what
Yeah.
your child's looking for. Your child's probably not looking for capitalism at that point, because I'm guessing they will also be rich. So
Yeah.
knowing
Yeah.
that they can have more money won't really mean much to them. Knowing that
Yeah.
they can feel
Yeah.
happy inside, that might
Yes.
mean something to them. And if they
Yeah.
can believe that you are feeling good inside, and they can see that being modeled, then they can believe that they can get through whatever it is that they are getting through, and that
Yeah.
they're accepted for who they are. This is the role modeling. So that's where that's the best I can say, as from my parenting point of view. It was a
Yeah.
matter of us
Yeah.
going, okay, what do we need for us to
To
get
do
through
through.
this,
Yeah. Yeah.
and work together as a team to make sure that the family stays
Support this
together,
child.
that child feels
Mm.
loved and is able to carry on their journey as
Yeah.
they see fit to be who they are. And that
Yeah.
child is 34 now. And I'll open up to the point of saying, and that despite some very serious attempts to not get there. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and doing very, very well now. So I'm
Yes.
not saying this is easy, and I'm not pretending that I have all the answers. I'm doing as you asked, Tony, and said, "Give me your
Yes.
thoughts." So here it is.
Thank you, John. Thank you. And I'm reminded of a comment that I've been playing in my own head lately. I've actually got it up on my mirror in the bathroom, and it is the simple fact that we can do hard things. Humans can do hard things. And I like to remind
Absolutely.
myself each day, we can do hard things. We are going to be okay. We can do hard things. So we've got a couple of minutes left, John, and I'd really like for you to quickly just run over the Andreia method online, because it's an amazing learning platform for everyone from
Yeah.
teenagers to 100 years old. So here's John with a quick explanation of the Andreia method online learning platform.
Okay, so the first thing I'd like listeners to know is they can go to Andreia.solutions. That's Andreia.solutions. Okay. And in there, you will find details of what is in the Andreia method. It is an online program that you can do anywhere, anytime, on any device. It
At any
involves
pace.
at any pace, self-paced, yes. And
Yeah.
but on average, Tony, we work out that you can complete the whole thing in 12 weeks if you do about 15 minutes a day on average. Some days they're more, some days they're
Yes.
less. It involves watching a video. We suggest you watch it more than once in a week. Do one lesson a week, and there's a workbook in which you can actually go through and write through that and really dig into how you're thinking and whatnot. Now, there will be content in there that people will go, "Oh, I don't really get that." And you won't first time round,
Yes.
because it's a matter of
Yes.
going around and around and around. This is a resource. Don't point your teenager at it. There you go. Point yourself at it. Your teenager's going
Yes.
to go,
Do it
"What?
first.
What?" Right? Well, even then, just what, like,
Yeah.
they're not going to. You have this will help you understand who you are being, and understand who
Yes.
you are as a role model. And then perhaps you
Yeah.
might want to cast yourself and say, well, if you're being role model A now, and you're not getting the results you want, and you know that to get the results you want, you need to be role model B. This will
Yes.
help you work out what you need to do to change. Now, if you go past that, or if you want to actually go in depth and have a look and say, okay, well, I really want to revolutionize my life, and I would like to get a coach, one-to-one coaching. Well, Tanya and I do one-to-one coaching
As well.
um, as well, and you can hook into that by sending me an email, John at Andreia, Andreia.solutions, and we'll have a chat and we'll sort something out from there. But the Andreia method, it's a method to live by. If you can live your life using that model, you can recreate your life from crash. Tanya and I know that's possible because we've done it,
Yes.
and this is
Absolutely.
this is the way we did it. And it's a curation of the knowledge that we had to find and put together, and we put it all there in a manner in which people can consume it and use it and time again. So again, go to Andreia, Andreia.solutions, and poke around. If you've got any questions, email me.
Thank you so much, John. Now, just quick clarification, it is just Andreia.solutions, no .com, no .com.au, Andreia.solutions. And
That's
that,
it.
my amazing friends, is our lot for this week. John and I will be back next week to talk more about living your best life and changing the way you think. Thank you so much, John, for all of your information today, and I look forward to joining you live on air next week with Radio Toni and the Power of You. Bye for now, everyone.